Good morning, good morning, good morning. I am here with Sean and Daryl again for the Light on Suitability podcast. Sean's a little bit under the weather. He might not tune in as much, but Daryl is very interested in continuing the conversation about relapse prevention planning, as am I, because it is very important. And most of my clients don't really understand what a relapse prevention plan is in terms of real life application, meaning they think that they can put some basically words, adjectives, adverbs on a piece of paper under the heading external and internal trigger, and they're good to go. They'll be granted parole, and that's that. But that's really not the way it is. And I think that Daryl has a very good understanding of that, as does Sean, about they're only words. And when I quiz a lot of my clients on what the words mean, they don't know. And one of the questions is, and I'd like Daryl and Sean to get into this, I think they'll understand this question. And I learned this question from a commissioner. The commissioner would ask my clients, and I hated this question up front, but now I understand it. And she would ask, okay, Mr. So-and-so, I'm doing a prison visit. I've been invited to come on the yards and talk to some of the inmates, and I'm walking out onto yard so-and-so, and there you are, Mr. Smith. I'll pick on Daryl. And why are you there? And of course, most of my clients either freeze up if we don't see the question coming, or they just can't accept that question. And their instant answer is no, it never happened. They don't understand the hypothetical as it is, but what she's really doing is wanting you to reverse engineer how that happened. And a lot of my clients don't understand how to do that. And I'm not talking about the ones with low cognitive function. I'm talking about the ones with good cognitive function. So with all of that as a backdrop, we get some deeper insights from Daryl and Sean.
Yes, good morning. I've been asked that question several times by several commissioners when I walk into the board. And as I made note last week, I unfortunately went to the board 8 times. And the first 5 times I did not have any intention of getting found suitable because I accepted a defeated mentality. I was in denial and I thought that I was never getting out. So I didn't put forth the effort that was necessary. However, the light clicked. I got tired of being tired. I started paying attention in the group, started learning. And as I made mention last week, a Patricia Cassidy, a commissioner, who saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. She gave me the roadmap. And she told me if I wanted to get found suitable and go home and be with my family, I need to identify my character defects and my causative factors. I need to not only identify them, understand them, work through them, and develop coping mechanisms, coping skills, which was developed into a relapse prevention plan, and be committed to it. And I went back and I asked everybody I knew to explain it. So again, like I made mention last week, I didn't even know what those things were before. I thought she was talking a foreign language. It took me 5 years to get it together. In 5-year journey, I was found suitable. Now let's get back to this question. If a commissioner or anyone came into the prison, see me on the yard, and asked me, why was I there? I used to be like many people who blamed society, who blamed the system, or who blamed my so-called accomplices. But I learned that when they ask questions like that, they want to know, what is it that I'm taking responsibility for? Are you taking responsibility for what led you to prison? And you can't say my delinquency, you can't say my parents did this, you can't say it, they're talking to me. So
let me jump in for 1 second, Daryl. And I mean,
yes.
She visits the prison after you've been granted parole and you're back on the yard.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Okay. I've seen, as Sean mentioned last week, and I'm gonna say it's a terrible event, but we were fortunate enough to see several men that were released through the parole board, granted suitability, released, and came back to prison. And I say we were fortunate enough to see them because we were given some insight that we wouldn't have never experienced. And mind you, listeners, if you were a lifetime inmate, you come back to prison, it's just like you're a lifetime inmate all over again. You got to start going to the parole board. Your family got to rake out all that money for your attorney. You got to go through the whole process all over again. And some people spend years. Most people would say, if they were open and honest, they did not stick to their relapse prevention plan. They did not continue to strive accordingly to the script that they grafted out for themselves so that they can continue to be successful in society. And this is one of the guys, and Sean, we know he was, in the building, and he said, I forgot my relapse prevention plan. He said when he paroled, he threw everything in the trash. It was over. So he thought, I made it, I'm good. And I was like, wow. However, and the relapse prevention plan, which is so misunderstood, taken so lightly by not only people like ourselves, but even our families, because they should also know what our relapse prevention plan is so that we can be reminded occasionally when they see us lapse. But for the question particularly, a person would say that they neglected to follow their relapse prevention plan. Hopefully they don't say they forgot, because I don't forget about my pain and my suffering and my aching, my loneliness in prison. I don't think about not having soups or a jar of coffee or whatever. I don't stop thinking about that. Regardless of what I may attain in this world now, I don't stop thinking about that because it's a reality. It's something I don't want to, experience ever again. So, Sean, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, like you said, it's very important for the relapse prevention plan. And few of the brothers that we know that came back wasn't following the relapse prevention plan. They threw it away, like you said. And so I think it's very important that we stick to the relapse prevention plan. Because even I had to go back to it since I've been out like at least 3 to 4 times already. And some of the times was just to look at it, just to remind myself and to see my goals, what I had set in my relapse prevention plan. And then some of the times I was just going through some things. And so I need to look and it was like, man, okay, this is where I need to stay focused at. This is where I need my anger. This is why I wrote out. And so, yeah, your relapse prevention plan is very important.
Daryl,
Usually I am.
what about, sorry, Sean,
Go ahead.
you're speaking low. What about specific triggers that you have noticed in the 4 or 5 months that you've been out? What are some things that come up as real life triggers rather than the kind of boilerplated triggers that are put in these plans that get presented to the commissioners?
Because I came to prison so young, getting arrested at 17 years old, and learning that my brain had not fully developed yet. I had issues that most children would have. And these issues were compartmentalized, or these issues were shielded by my pride and my ego, to where I felt offended, or when I was triggered, I responded very negatively first and foremost. But my triggers inside are the same triggers I have outside. For instance, feeling hurt. When I feel hurt, that's a trigger. It's a trigger for anger. And remember, anger, is a secondary emotion. So it's something that is utilized to protect you from usually fear and pain. Okay, so in a relapse prevention plan, you have to identify the things that trigger your anger or your criminality. So like feeling hurt, feeling frustrated. When I'm frustrated, that's a trigger. Fear is a trigger for me. But not only, or when I feel threatened or that I'm treated unfairly, these are triggers. But the thing about triggers, and everybody has them, you have to have warning signs to let you know when you're being triggered. And in your relapse prevention plan, this is very important, not only to know what your triggers are, but to know when you're being triggered. And for instance, like a rise in body temperature. For me, butterflies in my stomach, you know, my heart rate elevating, and I can like, why am I breathing heavy right now? You know, or even like a loss of breath. I mean, I experienced recently where it felt like I just couldn't breathe. I was like, whoa, you know, and these are warning signs that shows you that you're being triggered. And in your relapse prevention plan, you have to be able to articulate that to the commissioners, first of all, to yourself and understand them, then articulate them to the commissioners, because they know you're going to encounter many things throughout your life, every day. And if you can't address them and deal with them, then you're not going to be free. You're not ready to live in society. And like you, Elizabeth, and most people in society, you're triggered and you have warning signs, but because you haven't embraced these other mindsets that we have, like flawed thinking, it's easy to deal with. You just breathe and let it go. Sometimes you just say, well, that's not important. You keep going. But for people who made every little thing the gigantic thing, like we did in criminality or in the gang, then we have to go all the way back and redefine what's important and what's not important.
Well, I can tell you, even without embracing those mindsets, we don't always just breathe and let it go. Sometimes we stew and stew, but hey, I want to ask you then, what about examples, real life examples of an occasion since you've been released where you felt hurt, frustrated, fearful, threatened, or treated unfairly? Do you have any real life examples where you had to put this whole progression into place?
Yes, and I'm gonna take this, and again, for the audience and listeners, Sean is feeling a little under the weather, so if I may be talking a little more, it's only because I want him to heal and I want him to kind of get rest, but I do want him to be present. All right, so I'm gonna give you an example where all the things you just mentioned happened in one occurrence. That's a lot of food that I don't eat, so I went to a fish market, and I got my mask on, I got my sunglasses on. I'm dressed in all gray because I'm trying to be real neutral, and you know, especially when I'm in Los Angeles, because of colors. And there were some young ladies in there, and everything was going fine. I'm waiting for my food to order, and these two gentlemen walked in, and I say gentlemen because they don't know the idea or the definition of who or what they thought they were. They were gentlemen. Okay, so they walked in, and they looked at me, and they was like, looking me up and down, and one of them said, "Hey, what's up, OG?" I don't respond to that. I don't respond to that. You know, to me, that's an open invitation for more conversation. And you know, good morning, how you gentlemen doing? And they didn't get the response from me they wanted. I see the frustration instantly on their face. And one of the guys asked me, "Where you from?" You know, no, excuse me. Before that, he asked me, "Do you know where you at?" And I guess this was their neighborhood, their territory, and I'm an unfamiliar face. I said, "Yeah, I'm at the fish market, man. I'm trying to get some fish like everybody else." You know, again, if I was younger, still in my criminality, I would have said something different. So the women laughed at it, you know, and that kind of embarrassed the guys. So then the guy asked me, "Where you from?" Now at this time, I'm getting a little frustrated because I'm getting some unfair treatment right now. You should be out there bothering the people who, first of all, your age group, but someone who's looking for some problems, because I'm not looking for any problems. So he asked me where I'm from. I said, "Man, I'm from the earth. You know, I'm from the earth. You know, and by the way, peace be unto you." You know, and
I
this
know
is
you was getting frustrated.
Yeah, so you know me. So I'm trying at the same time de-escalate them, but not allow myself to be elevated. And the guy asked me not only, "Elizabeth, where am I from?" And I told him I'm not from anywhere. He said, "Where did you used to be from?" He's trying to read the tattoos, and I'm dark skinned, so you can't even read. I barely can read it. Where I used to be from. Wow. You know, I said, "Brother, I'm not into that." And then he had the audacity to ask me, "Well, where are your people from?" Meaning like a family member or something. I mean, they're looking for something, you know. And then the ladies in the room in the fish market, they said, "Why don't you guys mind your own business? I ain't bothering nobody." And they turned their attention to them and said some very disrespectful words to the women, you know, which also could have provoked me to try to defend the people who were trying to defend me.
Yep.
But knowing better, I just maintained my calm. But I felt like I was being treated so unfairly. It was a potential threat, you know. And my feelings was hurt because they were like challenging my masculinity, you know. And I was like, wow, this is crazy, you know. And after doing all this time, knowing what I know, you know, physically, I mean, knowing how to properly, you know, defend myself. And I was like, I just hope that nothing happens because I'm not gonna let anybody hurt me. But I felt all those things going through at one time. And then I felt the butterflies in my stomach. I felt the little thing in my back that usually says flight or flight. And I'm you know, I mean, and I'm not a flighter, you know. So, you know, I was like, wow. And I said, I breathe, let the breath out, you know, and I do what I do, practice my R's, you know. I relax, told myself, recognize there's a problem. It's not about retreating right now because they may follow me. So I relaxed and I just reflected like, wow, this is what society has come to now. You know, and if I didn't have the tools that I have, it could have been something different because my pride was, you know, was getting attacked, you know, and my ego was most definitely, your ego is a defender of your pride. So I was like, I sat and I was like, wow, this is all happening at one time. You know, and thanks be to the creator, the tools that I have embodied came completely into fruition. They were present. I was okay. I got my food. They were still there. I thought they were gonna like follow me outside. I was hoping they didn't. They didn't. I got my food and I just told them again, peace be to you brothers, have a good day. And I walked out. Didn't turn my back and look at them. You know, I just walked out. Didn't want to, you know, try to provoke anything. And I got back in the vehicle and I said, wow, it could have went down right there. You know, I mean, and the old me would have immediately took the one I thought was the best fighter and took him down first. And then I probably would have played with the other one. But I'm not trying to be like that anymore. You know, I want to do something else with my life. So these things happen in real life, you know, and I was like, wow, you know, if I had not learned this reality, I could be on my way to prison right now or possibly be hurt.
And that's something that you probably had experience dealing with on the yards, because just because you decide you're not playing the game anymore doesn't mean they don't either want you to play the game or need you to play the game, as it were. And so you probably had to play some of that same scenario out actually in the yards as well. So that's actually a really good example.
You're absolutely correct. But I'm gonna tell you this. And what I just talked about was triggers and warning signs. Coping skills is the biggest part of everything. And what we learned and accepted as our number one coping skill is, I don't want to make more victims.
Right.
That's easy. The first thing I tell myself is I don't want to make a new victim. You know, because I'm not going to be victimized. I mean, that's set. I mean, I'm sorry, you know, but I don't want to make a new victim. And immediately I use my second coping skill, which is to have positive self-talk. I'm gonna talk myself out of something before I allow myself to get into something. You know, first things first. And then I will talk to others for help. Something that a gang member, a criminal, we're not used to asking people for help or talking to others, because my next thing I would have said, hey, do you guys see what these guys are doing right here? I would have brought even if they weren't paying attention, I would have brought it to the attention of the people that were in that store with me, because they may be able to intervene, or they will be looked at as a witness, which may intimidate the other people and make them retreat. So you have to learn how to use these skills so that you don't have any conflict.
Right.
So are you going to be going back to that fish shop?
You know what? Actually, I'm gonna tell you something. I did go back. I did go back. And when I went back, it was an entirely different scenario. Because they have a thing called Fish Friday. You know, so you go, you know, and everybody go get their fish. I went in, and one of the people behind the desk, he was like, "Hey man, I seen it last time you came in, because you know, did you see me? I stand out, you know." And I seen it. He said, "Man, you dealt with that really good." You know, he's like, "Man, those guys are nuts. They always come in here, you know, creating problems." You know, and I'm like, "Well, y'all need to stop them from coming in here," you know, but because you do have a right to refuse service. And that's something that a lot of people don't exercise when they have stores and venues, you have a right to refuse service. You tell people, if you're going to keep coming here making problems, don't come in my store no more. You have a right to do that. But then they're probably worried about getting robbed or something. So,
Well, and retaliated because once they get refused, then their feelings are hurt. They come back, tell their fellow gang members, and
Yep.
that's a different story happening.
and just like you said, their feelings are hurt. And if they don't have any coping skills for their hurt feelings, that's how they respond. You exactly, and this is the need for relapse prevention plan. This is why we have this, because just that easy, a person's feelings gonna get hurt, and then they could do something stupid.
And empathy is a big thing, right? Because you could look at those youngsters and say, well, that was me some long time ago at 17, 16.
Shit, 26.
Oh, most
27.
definitely. Most definitely. I was thinking about when you was telling your story, it was like I was there watching you, right? Because I know how you are, right? And so to see that and to hear you experience that, you was being mindful, right? And that's that training we just went through.
Absolutely.
Right? And so you was paying attention to how your body was feeling. You was paying attention what your mind was telling you, right? And you was also paying attention to them.
I have to.
And that allowed you to be on point to where, because it would have been just like, as soon as they said something, what, blah, 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 that was it, right? It would have been over with. And so by you being mindful of what was going on with your body, how your thinking was, how your breathing was, right? You was able to stay in control. I'm proud of you, bro. I know. I'm proud of you.
And I'm gonna tell you
and
something.
And so what we learn, right, is when we go through these things in life, right? And so when we're talking to people, it's not something that we read out of a book, right? This is something that we read, we talked about, we taught, but it's some things that we went through and we used it. And so we know for sure that if you apply what we teach you, right, what we tell you, that it works.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We go talk to the schools, and we were talking about relapse prevention plan with some teachers. I call them educators, with some teachers. And they were like, you don't need to talk to the kids about this. You need to talk to us about this.
Yeah.
Because they got issues too. And I'm learning that not only is gang members and criminals have flawed thinking, but a majority of society has flawed thinking due to the culture and the television and the music that they listen to.
Yeah.
Because they accept it as true. That's not real on TV. Those people are not doing the stuff they're talking about in music. Why do you make it your reality? Your thinking is flawed.
Yeah.
So a relapse prevention plan should be something that we just get contracted out to teach throughout the state of California.
Yeah, you don't need to be locked up to have a relapse prevention plan. That's for sure.
No, I totally agree. Yeah, because even through your 20s and 30s, even if you're not, like you said, Daryl, you called it embraced negative thinking. I think embraced flawed thinking.
Flawed thinking. It's a concept.
You embrace a criminal thinking type of thing, but others of us embrace a different type of dysfunctional thinking. And even if we don't necessarily commit crimes per se, we still bury ourselves in drugs, alcohol. Even if that doesn't create an outside victim, it still creates a dysfunctional environment. We raise our kids under that environment, perhaps, or dysfunctional relationships. And so that's that cycle of violence from domestic violence. So if you don't feel worthy, so you've embraced a negative thinking about yourself, even if you don't turn into a so-called criminal, you got a bad marriage or relationships, for those women of us, you get call it the pickers wrong, you just keep attracting the wrong guy. that's something to do with flawed thinking as well. That's something to do with low self-esteem. That's a thing that says, I'm not worthy of a better partner. Or
Yes.
the other thing is the codependency, like I can't be happy without a partner. We all go through that quite a bit. But just to say, and I'm trying to follow on what Daryl just said, which is this is useful for everybody. And there's a lot of struggling people out there in life that don't have any kind of guidance. They just kind of go along mindlessly, work, put the TV, the mind control box is what I call it, on, rinse and repeat, and it's not a very fulfilling life.
I agree.
I want to give a few examples. And I want to, because I know, again, Sean's a little under the weather. We had a room full of educators, teachers, and we asked them, how many of you have suffered from any form of insecurity? 80% raised their hand. How many of you suffer from loneliness or boredom? Everybody raised their hand. How many of you have suffered, and I say suffered, meaning not just delved into it or experienced, but it created a problem for you? Powerlessness. Everybody did, because they were at work and they know at work the boss has the power, they have no power. So ask them, how many of you have experienced the fear of rejection or frustration? Of course. And then I looked around and I said, well, these are internal triggers.
Yep.
These are things that internally will trigger anger, pain, fear, something that demands a response. And I told them there's also external triggers, like negative influences. We call them fake friends. Fake friends, or peer pressure. How many of them have been bullied or felt overwhelmed? Or how many people, like you say, they have a need that I can't live without a partner? I mean, these are external triggers. And if they're not addressed, the way you respond, you're going to continue to respond, and you're going to be considered insane, because you're going to, like you say, the cycle continues because you're expecting a different results. So once they start listening, I mean, now we have their attention. We're talking about real life issues now. Look at Sean, poor Sean. Yes, it's so important for people to understand what they're going through throughout the moment, every moment throughout the day. But because society has you so consumed with everything else, you forget about you. You forget about you. And I, like most of us who come out of prison, I'm not going to forget about me. I'm not going to put you or anybody else before me, because no one is going to experience. No one's going to know how I felt going through what we went through for all those years. And I'm not going to do that again. But we do have to address these issues and help, to resolve, so I can have a nice community, nice society, nice family, nice friends, nice relationships. Sean, you want to say something?
No, I'm agreeing with you. I agree with you. I'm under the weather.
I know you are. I'm looking at you. I see you over there, fighting to keep your head up. Elizabeth.
Daryl, one thing, Daryl, relax, reflect, and something.
Okay, we have a thing called the 6 R's. Sometimes it's just the 4 R's. The 6 R's are recognize that there's a problem, retreat from the problem, relax, because usually your adrenaline is up when you retreated, reflect on what took place. That's 4. If you can do the next 2, then it's 6. The next 2 is to return to where you retreated from in order to resolve, to fix it. But if returning and resolving can create a bigger problem, you just exercise the 4.
Right.
What about in your case with the fish shop, where you couldn't really retreat necessarily at that moment because he was in your face and you had to use some workarounds, some creative conflict resolution at that moment?
Absolutely right. I'm gonna say I retreated, but not physically. See, and that's another thing. When we when we delve deep into these concepts, we just don't use an abstract understanding of them. Because again, we were forced to study the dictionary when we went to prison. So when I hear words, I see definitions. So when I recognized there was a problem, I seen that the door was not available for me. I wouldn't have ran out anyway, because unfortunately my pride still gets in the way every now and then. But I learned to retreat by not being assertive or aggressive with the people who wanted that. So I maintained a very humble position, and I was very calculated in how I responded to them. That's a form of retreating. That's a form of retreating. And then I had to breathe. I had to relax because I felt it. Like I said, I felt the butterflies. I felt the little thing in my back that said, knock them out. Get it over with, you know? And I had to reflect. This is the fourth. I reflected. First of all, they're nobody to me. First of all, they're nobody. They don't even know me. They're asking questions because they're in a blind. Keep them in a blind. Next, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to hurt you. That's not what I want to do. I didn't come to the fish market to hurt anybody. I'm reflecting. And then I said, well, I'm not alone. There's other people in the room, you know, in the store. So how far are you going to go? Even if they would have tried to jump on me, how far would they have made? There's cameras everywhere in society now. And this is when we learn to utilize the things that surround us in our environment, because they're there for a reason. They're there for a reason. So this is all a part of the practicing, you know, to recognize the problem, retreat if you can, you know, relax, and then if you have to, then reflect. But it has to become like this. You got to think about it daily. And I tell people, when you're at a stoplight, recognize what's going on, think about retreating from whatever you're feeling, relax for a moment, and then reflect. You could do it every day at a stoplight, and it becomes second nature. And before you know it, everything you encounter, you go through that cycle. And you're like, wow, this is easy. This is easy. And I want parents to do that with your children, because children are children, okay? Children are children. They don't know how to be you. And a lot of people have unrealistic expectations with their partners and think, listen, you're you. I don't know what's in your mind. I don't know what books you read. I don't know what understanding you have until it's explained or articulated to me. So let me be me. And if it's something that I do that offends you, we could talk about it later on when you're not upset. First of all, when you're not upset, we can talk about it, you know, or just you may learn something from me doing what I'm doing. So, you know, I mean, in this world of communication, this world of relationships, this world of just living amongst people, we got to learn how to be a little more tolerant, you know. But the first thing you have to learn to be is tolerant with yourself, and know that I'm not perfect and no one is, because that'll help a lot also with our anger.
And I think
Where did
that's
you
the problem
learn?
out here
Sorry,
in
Sean.
society. Go ahead, Liz.
No, you repeat that.
I said, I think that's the problem with our society. You know, everybody just running off their emotions. There's no self-control. They don't know about themselves, you know, internal, external triggers. They don't know nothing about themselves. And so by us being in prison, we had to learn about who we was, right? And what triggers us and what moves us, what don't move us, why this hurts us. And people out in society today, they don't even, from what I see since I've been home, it's like most people walk around like zombies, right? That's why you see all this road rage, people just running up in stores and churches and just shooting each other, because they don't know what's going on inside of them. They don't know how to control their anger and frustration. And so they don't have no coping skills. You see people going at it in the grocery stores. I'll be like, wow, this is crazy. So I think it's important that we all learn. We should start teaching a class, not just for people who, you know, that's in, you know, coming out or incarcerated, but for people out here also, so they'll learn and have a relapse prevention plan and learn how to tap in to themselves. As we went through the training, girl, being mindful.
Yes, yes. And I want to say, you know, you remember when we used to start our classes inside, we usually started, Elizabeth, with a list of character defects. A list. and we have the guys write down character defects, and through the week they would look up those character defects and see which one they fit in, which one is yours. And
Right.
you'll be surprised how many character defects a person has. But unknown and unaddressed creates big problem. Because remember, your character defects develop into your causative factors for whatever you
Exactly.
do. For whatever you do. You know, and I'm not just talking about criminals, because everyone's not a criminal, everyone's not a gang member, you know, but a character defect can create your alcoholism or your drug dependency or your codependency. So all these things need to be taken into account. And yes, Sean, you're right. It needs to be taught. It needs to be taught, because remember, poor behavior, bad behavior is learned behavior, because you don't come out the womb like that. It's learned.
At all.
So in order to change things, we're campaigning to de-educate and re-educate society to get back to who we were when we were young children, where everything was good. We didn't have any problem with anyone because of their nationality, their religion, their creed or class. We were just it was all good. But we learned how to become something different. And I want to give that training, that all that stuff, I want to give it back. I'm going to give it back. Give it back to the trash can that it came from.
What class was this 6 R's?
The 6 R's, actually, Sean, he was in the life of support group. He was a facilitator for that. And that was tremendously good for him. And I did it in a class called Life Cycle. And it was life, L-I-F-E, but cycle is an acronym for careless youth learning from life's experience. You know, they're being corrected by life's experience. Careless youth corrected by life's experience. So that's what, and it was a life-term inmates. And we had every youth on our yard that was 18 to 25, they had to participate in our group. They had to. When they went to committee, the captain would tell them, you are going to participate in life cycle.
Yeah.
And it was 16 life-term inmates who were mentors. And we tried our best just to give them our life experiences so that they won't have to repeat them.
Yeah, and we did that in,
Oh, go ahead.
we did that in CGA also. You can use the 6 R's or 4 R's in any group.
Absolutely.
You know, it
Absolutely.
doesn't matter what group it is. You can use that in any group. It's good. So we used it in CGA, which is Criminal Gang Members Anonymous. It's always a good tool to have in your toolbox.
Is that where that originates from? Criminal Gangs Anonymous, the 6 R's?
I'm not for sure where it originally came from. I just
Okay.
know it was passed down to us, and
Exactly. I'm not sure exactly where it came from, but it was passed down. It was tested and approved, like kid tested and approved, and we ran with it.
yeah.
Right. It's kind of a cognitive behavioral therapy type of tool.
Oh, absolutely. CBT, no doubt about it. CBT for sure.
But why don't we wrap things up? I'd like to get your feedback after reflecting on our conversation with David last week. What you reflected on about that conversation throughout the week.
I would say, go ahead, Sean.
No, go ahead.
I'm gonna say shortly and briefly, he prepared me for my 2-year break, because he said usually at 2 years being free, people get so complacent and get relaxed. And I'm like fighting that now. So I was like, wow, this is right on time for me. But if it's really going to get like that in 2 years, I need to be prepared. Some of the people who listen, I'm not gonna say my listeners because they're our listeners. Some of the people who listen, they really benefited on the relationship topic, on how 9 out of 10 relationships in prison were built upon a hocus pocus theory. And I'm using saying hocus pocus, and they don't last. And I know a lot of people getting out of prison, that's their reality, you know, because and I want to reiterate this, you have 15-minute phone calls, you have your visits, you have what people tell you, that's really all you know. Everything else you make it up. You know, both men and women, you know, the person in prison, the person outside of prison. That was really insightful for me. Really, really insightful, because I accept it as a reality. Being that I've been married several times in prison, and I wondered what happened, when those marriages didn't go well and everything. So I was like, oh wow, this is so true. And how did we miss that? I was like, Sean, how did we miss that?
I don't know. Like,
But
I
it
was
was good.
blown away when he was saying it. I was just like, wow, that is so true. So I was sharing it with Kevin and other people, and Jaime and them. They was like, wow, that is true, man. Like, you really don't know that person, or being at 2 years. So when he said 2 years, 2.5 years, I started looking now, and I was like, you know what? I need to start being alert right now. I don't want to wait 2.5 years. I want to be up on my game right now. And so he came with some good stuff. Someone that's been out for a while, and worked the steps, worked everything. He was very insightful for me and for our audience.
Yes.
And like I said, I spoke to him. Well, I spoke about the conversations we had with other people, and then we went right into a training that me and Daryl had to go through for 2 days for like what 6 hours, 8 hours. Oh my God!
Yes.
But it was a good training though. Don't get me wrong, it was phenomenal. My mentor, he's a bad man.
Yes.
So
I
yeah,
benefited
and then
from. I like David. Hopefully we'll invite him again.
yeah,
And he can bring more light to us because he has the experience that we need. He's been out 9 years, so I really like talking to people who I consider to be success stories.
most definitely. And even the ones that ain't success stories, right? Because we're gonna learn from them. We're gonna learn from them too. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
learn what not to do.
exactly. So we want to hear, where they went wrong at. Even the ones that ain't successful.
Yeah, that would be really good as well. I don't know
Yeah.
if we have any takers on that. It would have to be someone that conquered their pride. All right,
So,
troops, thanks for
did you
tuning
guys-
in.